So this week, we will be continuing on our journey through the 4Ds. Discovery we covered last week, which is understanding your market, your competition, and kind of the user demographic and user archetypes that will be coming to your website. This week, we're going to be covering define. Next week is we're going to get into design and then move on to development. Any questions when it comes to the discovery process and the research process behind understanding your market and competition and the users that will be going to your website?
So I still don't understand what's different between the market and the user.
So the market is kind of like, so let's say we're doing like Pizza Hut. The market for Pizza Hut would be food, restaurant distribution or something like that. Versus the user would be probably I don't know, college age student who doesn't have a ton of money who wants to eat a substantial meal for dinner. So the market is kind of like the general kind of market that company or that organization kind of lies underneath that umbrella. And then the users are the individual, more specific people that will be coming to the site to order pizza or buy flowers or do whatever they need to on your site. Does that make sense?
Okay.
So the market is just kind of like the umbrella of the industry that you're in versus the users are the individuals that are coming to your site.
Understand.
Any other questions? All right. Okay, so this week we are going to be talking about defining what exactly we're going to build in this class and build for your websites. So when we talk about defining anything, we are kind of build and put together the basic infrastructure and architecture behind the websites that you're building. So we're going to be talking about understanding the structure of the website by talking about creating sitemaps and sketching out ideas on like where all the objects are going to go on each page, how it's going to be laid out, what's going to be in the header and the footer. And then once we kind of have a basic understanding through our sketches, like literal like pen, pencil, and paper sketches, then we can take this to something that's a little bit more polished by creating wireframes in something like Adobe Illustrator or Sketch or Figma or some of these other programs. So that's kind of the process, is understanding the structure of your site by creating sitemaps. So we know like we have a home page, we have secondary pages, we have tertiary pages kind of coming off of those. Doing our sketches to understand just the general kind of layout and architecture of the site, visual architecture of the site, and then kind of doing more polished wireframing in Adobe Illustrator or a platform that you choose to use. So let's go through the website structuring process in a bit more detail. So with any website, we always start with a home page for the website, which is the main page that everyone goes to initially. Then we branch off from the home page and drill down into the secondary page level for the website. So these are all of our secondary pages that are linked to the home page. Attached to the secondary pages, there could be potentially tertiary pages, so like a third level deep of pages on your website. And obviously you can continue on and on depending on the amount of content that you have on your website. My guess is that, especially if you're doing portfolio sites, you're probably just going to have a secondary level So I don't think you're going to go too deep into the tertiary and beyond when it comes to the pages that you're going to be developing for your site. And then on top of all that, there could be potentially global pages. So this usually includes links that are visible on all pages, like contact us or legal or sitemap links, or link back to the homepage. And all that is usually somewhere like on the footer or maybe in the sidebar somewhere. Any questions about just the basic structure of pretty much any website? Okay. So to be as clear as possible when structuring a website, we need to first start with a sitemap. So sitemaps are mainly created so you understand what pages you'll include and how they all link together. So here's an example of a nice and very clean sitemap layout created using Adobe Illustrator. You can see that it's very simple structure. We have a home page at the top, secondary pages, tertiary pages, and global pages on the bottom left. So home page, secondary pages, then all of our tertiary pages, and then these are our global pages. So if we zoom in, you can see that every page also has a number identifier. I think this is helpful to include, especially with more complex sites that have a lot of pages associated to it. It's probably not essential to do it for like a portfolio site, but anything larger than that, that has like 10, 20 or more pages associated to it, you probably want to have some sort of like numerical identifier, so you can work with your clients, since you're probably going to be doing this for a client, and have them know by number like which section you're talking about when you're doing a presentation for them. Another good thing that you could do is color coding, just so you can visually see the hierarchy. So at the top, the home page is in blue, then the secondary pages are in this like purple color. All the tertiary pages are just white, and then the global pages are orange. Again, you just want to be as clean and clear as possible when it comes to putting together a sitemap, so it's just easy to read, easy to navigate. And it's good to do this for any site, regardless, all of this for any site, regardless of the size, just to get used to the process of creating clean, easy to read, easy to navigate sitemaps. So here's an example of a slightly more complex sitemap. I think is okay, but they could have been a little bit more clean and maybe added numbers or some color coding to it, to make it a little bit more user-friendly and easy to navigate. But this is a decent one that I found online. This is another example of a sitemap that is actually pretty terrible. It's really hard to read, really hard to navigate. The arrows are really unnecessarily adding detail to the sitemap. The homepage icon is kind of the distracting element because it's just adding more detail and more complexity to it. The only thing that they did well was probably using color to differentiate different sections. But they also use different colors for the same level, which is also kind of defeats the purpose. So all in all, this is a pretty terrible example and just an example of what not to do, essentially. Any questions about sitemaps?
No.
Okay, cool. Okay, so now before we move on to the wireframing process, we first have to have a basic understanding of how to use a grid to help us structure each each page layout that we're designing. So who uses them? Traditionally print designers, but it's become more popular and very important for website designers and app designers to use grids as well. What do they do? So it makes the design look more professional, helps the designer position all the assets on the page and just have general structure and a bit of architecture, visual architecture for the website. Helps everything be in place and helps the user navigate from one area to the next. Also, grids help create continuity between different pages and new content. It also helps guide users to easily find what they need. Also, there are multiple people working on the design, most likely. So if it follows a grid system, then it won't be hard to work with multiple designers on any one website design. So there's an infinite number of grid systems that you can use. The kind of popular one that has been used for years and years is a 960 grid system, which is the website is 960 pixels wide and kind of broken into a certain number of columns from there. So this is a 12 column grid system. So it's broken into 12 columns to make up the 960 pixels wide. And each column has a bit of padding in between. So it's just some space in between as well. So with the 12, was it 12 or 16 columns? Hold on. So with the columns that we have here, we have a number of ways of kind of dividing it into multiple kind of grid systems. So we could do just a full width, which is 940 pixels, which includes kind of the padding on the side to make it 960. It can have 2 columns, which is 460 pixels next to each other, 3 columns, which is 300 pixels next to each other, 4 columns, which is 220 pixels, and 6 columns, which is 140 pixel columns. But you could also mix and match. So you could do like 460 column here, and then 220 and 220 next to it, or 140, 140, 140 next to that, etc. So you have some freedom and customization when it comes to how you use this grid system. So again, here are just some other examples of how you can kind of lay things out. So you can do 620 and 300 pixels. This is kind of like a standard kind of blog layout. So you have the content of the blog on the left-hand side and like the sidebar on the right-hand side, which has like all the navigation and blog posts and whatnot. Yeah, so there's a lot of different options when it comes to using this 960 grid system broken into multiple columns. So here's kind of a basic structure for any website. You have a header at the top, body is the main content, and then the footer at the bottom. We can also kind of do this in a little bit more detail. We have the header at the top, then the navigation. You could have a feature panel or something, which has maybe like a rotating module of images or videos in here. And then you could have a couple columns of content. These could be like call outs, bits of information. If you want to highlight like a certain section in your website. And then we have the footer at the bottom. Here's another example. This is kind of more like a blog website. So we have the header at the top, feature panel that's much larger here, navigation on the side, and then some content areas to highlight maybe more like secondary bits of information that are below on a hierarchical level below the feature panel information. And then the footer at the bottom. So that's the 960 grid system. Do you guys have any questions about that? I would recommend playing around with it, but I'm not requiring you guys to use that. If you want to use a different grid system or different width for your website, you can do that as well. Some people like the golden ratio is a popular grid system to use. So there's lots of other options too. And again, we're right now just talking about desktop and like laptop grid systems. When you move to like mobile devices, that's like a whole nother world that you have to think about as well, which is mostly vertical. Any questions about that?
No.
Okay. All right. Sketching is very important when it comes to really designing anything. Having a notepad and pencil next to you at all times, or at least close by, where you can just grab it when you have an idea and like sketch out and draw out little designs is really important. So we always really should start by just using pen, pencil, paper to come up with ideas, to jot out sketches. It's the simplest and fastest tool to use to get whatever's working in your mind in a visual format to share with the rest of the class, or to share with your client or your colleagues. So this is a really good initial tool to use, and it's very accessible and easy to pick up and just start jotting out ideas and sketching out ideas. So here are a few examples of sketches for websites specifically. These sketches are mainly about positioning and just general layout of where the content's going to live on the website. Where do I place images? Where will the main navigation be? Where will my logo be placed? So they not only have to be, they don't have to be too detailed at all. It's just kind of like drawing a box with an X in it represents an image. A box with like crosshairs in it or squiggly lines in it can represent a header or large type or something. Or like just squiggly lines can represent lines of text. So it doesn't have to be detailed at all. It should just be very kind of general to get an idea of where things are going to be placed in the grid on the layout that you're designing for your site. If you want to get more detail, that's fine too. This is just slightly more detail, a little bit more illustrative. And the one good thing that I think is going on here is that there's notation on the sides. So there's a bit of text saying like, this is where the logo should be. It should be like certain color. It should be, have a drop shadow on it. The navigation should be horizontal, not vertical. So all these little bits of information, these notations on the side are helpful for you to understand and remember like what you were thinking at the time and where you want to place different things. Here's just another example of a nicely put together sketch for a website with good notation on the side, arrows pointing different sections, explaining what that sections should be focusing on. But again, like the text is just like lines, headers are just squiggly lines that are a little bit bigger. This person did a little bit more illustrative designs for like the header when it comes to like how the image should kind of look and where it should be placed. So all of these are really good examples of sketches when it comes to getting your ideas on paper and getting them ready to be wireframed out in something like Illustrator, or Sketch, or Figma. Cool. Any questions about that? Okay. All right. So finally, once we have our final ideas on paper, we can go ahead and start the wireframing stage. So once we know generally where all the content is going to be on the homepage and secondary pages and tertiary pages, then we can start kind of polishing it up in the computer. So wireframes are simply a more refined version of the sketches that we create. Images are still represented by just a box with an X in it. Content can simply be a box with a label for what will be there eventually. And the navigation is just kind of the same, just a box with a label of what's going to be there. Eventually, we're going to add more content. It's going to be more, there's going to be more detail added to it. So the only difference from the sketches at this point is just it's formatted in something like Illustrator or Figma or Sketch, whichever you prefer to use. All the measurements on the grid are precise. Now, this example is okay, but for my personal taste, it's a little bit too minimal. So I like to go a little bit further with the content and like what the text and the detail of what's going to be on the wireframes. So here's a slightly more detailed version of a wireframe. So at the top, we kind of have a general idea of what the navigation is going to start to look like. We have an idea of where the logo is going to be and if it's going to be like a logo type or something else. We know that this is going to be like a search area. This is going to be like a rotating module of images. There's going to be some sort of tagline here. There's going to be a couple of columns of content. So now the text is actually being flown in, but it's just being used as dummy copy. It's called lorem ipsum. So it's just kind of a placeholder text, but it's actual text. So you can start looking at like what the text looks like in place, kind of styling out the buttons a little bit more, adding kind of shading to represent like different tonal, visual tonal elements and sections. So this is kind of like a little bit of a step further with the wireframes that we're putting together. And I think this is probably a good area to aim for when it comes to the amount of detail that you include in your wireframes. Now we can take this another step further and start adding more notation on the sides and notes in our wireframes. This is really, it's probably a good thing to do regardless of who's going to be developing it, but this is really necessary when it comes to if you're just designing the website and working with the developer to build it out. It's important to have as much detail as possible and notation as possible in your wireframe so they know like what the hover state's going to be like, what if there's a section that's going to be like rotating. So it's stuff like that should be kind of notated for the developer when they're actually putting it together so they know what to build and how to build it based off of what you've designed and put together. So notation is good to have at all times in your wireframes, but it's especially important to have if you're not developing the website yourself, if you're working with another person to develop it. Cool. All right, so now to avoid the headache of labeling every single thing on your wireframes, um, still good to do, but we can also use platforms like this one. This is called an Envision app, which basically allows us to upload images of our wireframes or designs and then add like simple hover states. So when you hover over something, it'll change to a different image. Hover over this, it'll add like a drop down, again, just an image. So it's kind of like a um, faking what the website is going to actually, uh, how the user is going to interact with website eventually, but it's just using images rather than actually developing something and programming something out. So it's like a prototype essentially of what the website's gonna be. And this is usually what designers use to share with their clients when it comes to how someone's going to interact with like a hover state or a drop down or like a rotating module. So they use something like this before they actually get to the development stage. Cool. Any questions so far? Okay. Okay, so why don't I just kind of walk you through some case studies. So I did one case study, just kind of pretending Queens College was our client. So this is Queens College as our client. I put together the wireframes based off of the Queens College website as best as I could. So we have the homepage at the top and then secondary pages, tertiary pages, and global pages. So if you zoom in, we have about QC, admissions, academics, student life, community outreach, make a gift. So those are the secondary pages. And then all the tertiary pages underneath are like QC at a glance, administration, institutional research, strategic plan, doing business with QC, etc. And then the global pages are like index, I think that's homepage, suggestions, disclaimers, sitemaps, and map of the campus. So if I was the designer designing out their site, this is just a very simple sketch of what the homepage would look like. So we have like a logo at the top, our global navigation and search area at the top as well. Our main navigation below that. This is a rotating module for images and other content, news and important information, a profile of a particular staff member or student goes there. Social media goes in the footer. This is all the footer, and then the footer global navigation at the bottom as well. So that's my sketch. This is a wireframe based off of the sketch I created. So it's just more detailed. Logo at the top, rotating module here. So it's all basically the same stuff, just we have like dummy copy for text, just an X with a box with an X in it to represent images. But all the measurements and like the placement of everything is precise down to the pixel. So we have like precisely where everything is going to go in the design, which is important to know when we're actually developing the site as well. And then once we're ready to go with the design, then we can take that wireframe and then basically look at typeface and color schemes and other design elements to actually kind of put together the design of the website that's kind of the skin on top of the skeleton of the wireframe, essentially. So I could do one more case study. This is Data Visual. This is the data visualization design platform that I created and founded like 8 years ago. So this is my first iteration of designing the website. So this is my sitemap. So I did it instead of vertically, I did it horizontally. So we have the home page at the top, then about. These are my secondary pages. So the kind of layout is a little different, but the idea is the same. So we have about, data designer, which is the kind of tool for designing the charts and graphs, community gallery, and then marketplace. So about has how to use and like the team, and about us. Data designer has create a new chart, select a base style, upload an SVG, and then outputting. And then also the library of already designed charts and graphs. And then global pages will include like the user login and sign up, contact us, terms of use, and privacy policy. And then I also have a user pages section, which is kind of similar to the global pages, which is the user account and user settings. Here are my sketches for the homepage design, the community gallery, and then the data designer as well. So logos at the top, my navigation, login and sign up is over here. This is like a header kind of call out section that has like information on as simple as 1, 2, 3 to use data visual. So how to use it. There's a image of it being used, more descriptive highlights on how to actually use the platform, and then the footer content. Community gallery is basically just a gallery of images of charts and graphs that people have designed and are sharing with the community. And then the data designer has a bit of graphic user interface over here to like change the style and the visual design of the charts and graphs as well. So these are my sketches, and then these are my wireframes. So again, it's very similar to the sketches, just a little cleaner, more precise on where things are going to go. And yeah, and then these are, I did two, I think these are two home, oh no, this is the about page, and then this is the home page. Again, wireframes, and then this is the final design. So things did change a little bit from wireframe to like the final design, but not by a lot. Rather than having like 1, 2, 3 over here, it's just these icons for like design, data, and output. And then here is the wireframe for the data designer. And then this is what ultimately it looked like in the end. So very similar, just slightly different when it comes to like minor positioning changes, adding another section at the bottom. But the basic structure is the same. And then community gallery, again, very similar, except it went from 3 columns to 4 columns. But all the content's kind of the same. Still has this rating system. The type of the name of the chart actually went up instead of being down. So minor things change from wireframes to design, but nothing major. And then this is the old design, but this is the data designer platform. So you have the chart here, the graphic user interface on the right, and then export and upload options at the top. So this changed kind of significantly because it went through a lot of iterations and a lot of testing and a lot of user testing. And this is actually not the latest one. So it's changed even since we've designed it and developed it. We've redesigned it and redeveloped it and redesigned it and redeveloped it based off of user feedback. So so honestly, the discovery phase of any website really, especially if it's being used frequently, really should never stop. You should always be getting feedback and always iterating on that feedback and improving the site based off of what users are telling you. So yeah, so that's what we've done with data visual and we'll continue to do with data visual. Cool. Any questions?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay. All right. So that's all I have for the lecture. Let's take a look at what I want you guys to focus on today. So on the class website, I have a sitemap template that you could use if you wanted to. This is just a PDF that you can download and add your content to for the sitemap. And I also have a wireframe template. This is the Queens College wireframe that I put together that, again, you can download and use as a starting point, or use the elements and kind of like reposition things based off of where you want things to go. So for homework today, I want you to, and in classwork, I want you to create a blog post listing 3 websites that you think are nicely designed with an explanation why. Also create a Pinterest account if you don't already have one, and create a board for this class. Use this board as your project's mood board as a way to collect images, colors, type, layouts, and anything else that will inspire you while you design your website. Post a link to your board on the blog and in Slack. Here's a link to one that I created. For the in-class assignment today, I want you to take what you learned through the lecture and apply it to your own website. So whatever website you're going to build, whether it's a portfolio site or something else, I want you to create a sitemap for your website, sketch out wireframes for any unique pages on your website. So for a portfolio site, that would include like the home page, gallery page, project detail page, about page, and contact us page. So I want sketches for each one of those pages. Once you've sketched out your idea and know where all the assets are going to be, create a final version of your wireframes using Illustrator or Figma or Sketch, so whichever you prefer. Post an image of your sitemap, take photos of your sketches, and add an image of your final wireframes to the blog. And then again, add that to the Slack channel for all of us to see and enjoy. So that's the in-class assignment. And then the homework assignment is to do the Pinterest board, to kind of create a mood board around the kind of look and feel of an inspiration behind what you want to design for your website, how you want it to look.